Hey, plant lovers! Welcome back! Today, we're going into the mystery of why aloe vera blooms, and what I discovered when I went deep on this will fundamentally change the way you see this plant. Not just botanically, at every level. Picture this. It's early morning, maybe 6:30, and the winter light is coming through the kitchen window at a low angle, the kind that turns everything amber. You're making coffee. You walk past the shelf where you've kept your aloe for, what, 3 years now? Maybe 4. You don't even look at it anymore. It's just there, green, spiky, quietly doing its thing. But something today makes you stop. There's a stalk you've never seen before, thin and tall, rising straight from the center of the plant, like an antenna reaching for something. And clustered along it, small tubular flowers, orange, almost copper, just beginning to open. And there's a smell, faint, like something between honey and grass, barely there, but unmistakably present. And you think, has this always been here? Did I just miss it? How long has this been happening? Most people own an aloe for a decade and never see that stalk, not once. The plant just sits there, green and dependable. And that's the whole story. But for someone else, someone with the same plant, the same pot, maybe less attentive care, that flower appears. And when it does, everything changes. So the question isn't just why it bloomed, it's what does it mean that it bloomed now, here, with you. And here's what's wild. The spiritual explanation and the scientific one arrive at the exact same conclusion, from completely different paths. Now, aloe vera is one of the most common plants on Earth. You'll find it on windowsills in Anchorage, on patios in Phoenix, in hospital waiting rooms and dentist offices from Boston to San Diego. It is everywhere. It survives neglect. It survives drought. Cut a leaf and the gel seals the wound within hours. It's practically indestructible. And yet, this one thing, this flower, almost nobody sees it. An aloe grown indoors can take anywhere from 5 to 10 years to produce its first bloom. And many never do it at all. Think about that. A plant that endures almost everything cannot or will not produce a flower under ordinary conditions. It needs something else, something specific, something that most home environments never provide. That's the driving question of this entire video. What is that something? What does an aloe require before it decides to bloom? Two people come to mind. I spoke with a retired teacher in Savannah, Georgia. She'd had her aloe for 22 years. Never a single flower. She called it her most reliable disappointment. And then there's a woman in Denver, Colorado, who got a cutting from her mother 3 years ago. Stuck it in a terracotta pot on her south-facing balcony. Basically forgot about it through one dry Colorado winter. And came home in March to find it in full bloom. Her mother had never seen that plant bloom. Not in 15 years of ownership. And I'll tell you something that's going to surprise you. Both the spiritual explanation and the scientific one point to the exact same conclusion. Just from completely different paths. But to understand it, we need to start with what wisdom traditions have been saying for generations. The first place I want to take you is the American South, specifically the low country of South Carolina and coastal Georgia. Places like Beaufort, Brunswick, the sea islands that dot the coastline, where African-American communities maintained an unbroken thread of plant knowledge that came directly from West African tradition. Aloe vera arrived in this region through the slave trade, brought deliberately because the people who came understood its medicinal value. In these communities, the plant wasn't decorative. It was a household sentinel. Pots of aloe sat at doorways and near sick beds. And its blooming was noticed, recorded, talked about in the particular language these communities used to pass knowledge down through generations. Not in books, but in kitchens and on porches. I came across documented oral histories collected by the Penn Center on St. Helena Island in the 1960s. And in these accounts, there's a recurring observation. When aloe bloomed in a household, something good was coming. Not as a belief, exactly, as a pattern. A woman who'd been tending plants for 62 years, interviewed in 1967 in Beaufort, described it this way. She said in the 6 times she'd seen aloe bloom in her life, once in her grandmother's house, twice in her own, something in that household changed. A debt got settled. A child came home. A sickness lifted. She wasn't claiming the flower caused it. She was saying the flower came when the house was ready, when whatever had been tangled in that family finally straightened out. In the summer of 1948, her aloe bloomed for the first time. Her eldest son, who'd been working in Chicago for 4 years, came home unexpectedly that October and decided to stay. The plant knew before we did, she said. What's significant here isn't the supernatural claim, it's the pattern. These communities were observing over decades and generations that aloe blooming coincided with periods of stability and resolution. Science would eventually explain why, but these communities saw it first. To understand the deeper spiritual lineage, you have to go to where aloe vera comes from. Its native territory is the Arabian Peninsula, specifically the arid zones of Yemen and Oman, and the dry coastal regions of East Africa, particularly what is now Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia. In these landscapes, aloe didn't just grow, it was venerated. In the highland communities of Ethiopia, there is a practice, still observed in some villages in the Tigray and Amhara regions, of planting aloe at the borders of family compounds. Not for decoration, as a boundary marker with spiritual significance. The plant was understood to absorb harmful energy from outside and convert it. Its spikes deflected ill intention. Its gel healed wounds. It was a plant that transformed danger into medicine. When an aloe bloomed in this context, it was announced. The head of the household was called. Neighbors were told. There is a word in Amharic, novi, roughly translated as holiness or sanctification, that traditional healers in these communities applied specifically to a blooming aloe. The plant wasn't just flowering, it was declaring that the compound it protected had reached a state worthy of full expression. The ancestors who governed that family's well-being had recognized the quality of the care being given. The bloom was acknowledgement, a signal back from the spirit world that what you're doing here is right. And what's extraordinary, when you layer the botany over this, is that the conditions required for an aloe to bloom in the dry highlands of Ethiopia are the same conditions that trigger it in your living room in Minneapolis or Columbus. Seasonal temperature variation, controlled drought, adequate light, roots that feel just slightly constrained. These communities didn't have the scientific vocabulary, but they were watching the plant and correctly understanding that the bloom came during a particular quality of environmental balance. They named it holiness. Botanists would later call it optimal hormetic stress. Different language, same observation. In the northeastern Arizona desert, where the Hopi people have lived for over 1,000 years, there's a tradition of careful attention to plants that grow near inhabited spaces. The Hopi do not consider plants passive. They are understood as beings with their own kind of perception, their own relationship to the land, and to the people who care for them. Aloe was introduced to Hopi territory relatively recently, within the last 2 centuries, but it was incorporated quickly into the framework of plant knowledge that already existed there. A Hopi elder, speaking at a plant symposium in Flagstaff in 1994, described the community's relationship to aloe this way. When a plant decides to show you its flower, it has been watching. It has felt the quality of the hands that touched it. It is not giving you the flower. It is returning what you gave it. 2 sentences. And here's what strikes me about those 2 sentences. This observation, made without microscopes or controlled studies or botanical training, aligns exactly with what researchers at the University of Arizona and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension confirmed through decades of experimental work. The bloom is not a gift from the plant to the keeper. It is a measurable biological response to the quality of the environment the keeper created. The Hopi elders' language is poetic. The scientist language is technical. But what they're describing is identical. In Feng Shui, which is practiced widely now across American homes, particularly in California, New York, and the Pacific Northwest, aloe vera holds a specific and important position. It is classified as a protection plant. Its spiky form is understood to deflect what practitioners call sha-qi, harsh or cutting energy, before it can settle into a living space. And its gel represents transformation, the capacity to receive harm and convert it into medicine. These aren't abstract ideas in Feng Shui practice. They have specific placement implications. An aloe near the front entrance of a home is said to protect the mouth of qi, the point where energy enters from the outside world, filtering what comes in before it reaches the people inside. An aloe in the bedroom is considered grounding, stabilizing sleep energy. In a home office or workspace, it's associated with clear, productive mental energy, the kind that allows focused work rather than scattered effort. But when an aloe blooms, that's a different category entirely. In Feng Shui, a blooming aloe signals that qi has achieved full circulation. Not just that energy is present, but that it is moving correctly. No stagnation in corners, no blocked pathways, no harsh angles creating energy that cuts through a space rather than flowing through it. The entire energetic ecosystem of the home has reached a state where even the most demanding plant responds with its rarest act. The location of the bloom matters. Near an east-facing window, it is associated with family renewal and health. East being the direction of the sunrise, of new cycles beginning. At the home's entrance, it signals that prosperity has a clear path in. In a living room, it reflects that the social energy of the household is harmonious. In a home office, it means that ambition and effort have aligned in a way that invites real results. And what's interesting is that Feng Shui doesn't contradict science here. It complements it in a way that I find absolutely extraordinary. Now comes the scientific part, and I promise, when you hear it, everything is going to make sense. Let's start with the most fundamental question. What actually triggers an aloe to bloom at the biological level? Aloe vera, in its native habitat on the Arabian Peninsula and in the dry highlands of East Africa, experiences a very specific annual pattern. Scorching days, cool nights, a dry season that tests the plant's water reserves. Then, a brief season of moderate rainfall. The plant evolved over millions of years to read these environmental signals like a calendar. When the pattern says conditions are stable enough to survive, but uncertain enough to warrant investment in reproduction, that's when the bloom trigger fires. The mechanism involves a class of plant hormones called gibberellins and a protein signaling process that responds to temperature differentials between day and night. When the nighttime temperature drops significantly below the daytime temperature, what researchers call a substantial diurnal range, the plant's internal clock registers a seasonal shift. Simultaneously, when roots begin to sense spatial limitation, not stress exactly, more like density, a separate signal gets sent upward through the vascular tissue. The combination of these two signals arriving together is what most researchers believe constitutes the primary bloom trigger. Dr. Karen Koch at the University of Florida's Environmental Horticulture Department has spent years studying carbohydrate partitioning in succulents, specifically how plants redirect their internal energy reserves from vegetative growth to reproductive effort. Her work shows that the decision to bloom isn't made suddenly. It's made gradually over multiple growing seasons as the plant builds up enough stored energy to fund the entire reproductive effort. The stalk, the flowers, the nectar, the seeds. The bloom you see arriving in one morning was years in preparation. Here's the part that makes this truly remarkable. Those years of preparation required consistent conditions, not perfect conditions. Perfect conditions actually work against blooming, as I'll explain in a moment. But consistent ones. Predictable light cycles. Watering patterns that allow the soil to fully dry between sessions. A pot that fits the root ball without excessive extra space. What's happening at the cellular level is something botanists call hormesis, and I want to explain exactly what that means because it's the key to everything. Hormesis is the principle that moderate controlled stress activates an organism's most extraordinary capabilities. Not total ease, not crisis, the middle ground between them. An athlete who trains with progressive resistance becomes stronger than one who rests completely, but also stronger than one who overtaxes themselves into injury. The challenge has to be real, but survivable. And the organism's response to that challenge is to activate reserves that wouldn't be touched under easy conditions. For aloe, the hormetic triggers are specific and documentable. Temperatures that drop 10 to 15 degrees at night versus daytime, easily achieved in American homes near exterior walls or windows. Watering cycles that allow the soil to dry completely. Creating brief periods where the plant draws on leaf-stored water before the next drink. And root conditions that are slightly dense. Not cramped to the point of distress, but not swimming in loose soil either. Research from Cornell Cooperative Extension and Texas A&M Agri-Life Extension confirms that aloe plants grown in slightly snug pots, watered on strict infrequent schedules, and placed where they experience natural temperature variation, bloom significantly more reliably than plants in large pots with frequent watering and climate-controlled environments. Here's what this means for everything traditions were saying. The plant needs an environment that is intentional, attentive, not obsessive, because obsessive care removes the stress the plant needs, but not neglectful. The bloom happens when someone is paying the right kind of attention. Not too much, not too little. What these traditions were observing when they said, "The bloom comes to homes in harmony," when they said, "The plant returns what it received." They were describing hormesis in the language available to them. They were describing the observed pattern without the molecular mechanism. But the pattern they described is accurate. Do you see what this means? The ancestors watching aloe in the highlands of Ethiopia, the healers of the South Carolina Low Country, the Hopi elder in Arizona, the feng shui practitioner arranging energy flow in a San Francisco apartment. They were all looking at the same biological reality from the outside. And science looked at the same reality from the inside. And they all arrived at the same place. Ancient traditions say the bloom comes when the home has reached harmony, when care, stability, and intention have created conditions worthy of this rare gift. Feng Shui says the bloom comes when qi circulates completely, when the home's energy has no obstruction, no stagnation, no imbalance preventing full expression. Science says the bloom comes when the plant has accumulated enough stored energy, experienced the right hormetic triggers, and received consistent enough care to redirect all of that accumulated potential into a single reproductive effort. They are all describing the same thing, just in different languages. The common thread is this: an environment that was created deliberately, maintained consistently, and calibrated carefully. Not too much, not too little, exactly enough. Every tradition from the Hopi Highlands to the feng shui consultation rooms of the Pacific Northwest is pointing at the same quality: intentional balance sustained over time. Two different paths, one identical truth. Now, I know you've been waiting for this part, because understanding the mystery is one thing, but knowing what to actually do, that's where this gets useful. Here are the factors that genuinely increase the likelihood of your aloe blooming, based on what the science says and what experienced American growers have observed. The first factor is light, and specifically, the quality and consistency of it. Aloe vera needs a minimum of 6 hours of direct sun per day to build the energy reserves that blooming requires. But here's what most people miss. It's not just about intensity, it's about stability. Aloe plants that get 6 reliable hours of morning light from an east or south-facing window, the kind that arrives predictably every day at the same angle and temperature, outperform plants that get 8 chaotic hours of light that shifts constantly with cloud cover and seasonal window positioning. In American homes, a south-facing window in northern states like Minnesota, Ohio, or Pennsylvania is the gold standard. In sunnier states, Arizona, Texas, Southern California, a spot on a covered patio where the plant gets bright indirect light in summer and full sun in fall, and winter often works better than indoor placement. Move it outside when nighttime temperatures stay reliably above 50 deg. Move it back in before the first frost. That seasonal transition itself can function as a hormetic trigger. The second factor is watering, and this is where most people undo themselves. The instinct, when you care about a plant, is to water it frequently. You're expressing attention. You're doing something. But aloe vera evolved in environments where drought is a regular reality, and its biology is calibrated to expect periodic dry periods. Water thoroughly until water runs freely from the drainage holes, and then wait. Wait until the top 2 in of soil are completely dry. In most American homes, that means watering every 2 to 3 weeks in summer, every 3 to 4 weeks in fall, and possibly monthly or less during winter when heating systems dry the air. What many people don't know is that the brief stress of drying out completely is exactly the kind of controlled difficulty that nudges aloe toward reproductive mode. Restraint is care. Saying no to the impulse to water is one of the most nurturing things you can do. The third factor is soil and drainage, and it's simpler than most people think. Aloe roots need to stay dry between waterings, and that means the soil has to drain fast. Standard potting mix holds too much moisture. Use cactus and succulent mix, available at any Home Depot, Lowe's, or independent garden center across America. Or make your own by combining potting soil with perlite and coarse sand in roughly equal thirds. The test. Water should pour through within seconds, not pool on the surface. If it pools, the mix is too dense. Repot immediately. Aloe sitting in waterlogged soil cannot accumulate the energy needed for blooming. It's too busy trying to survive. The fourth factor is pot sizing, and this surprises people. More space seems like more generosity. But a pot that is too large holds too much soil, which retains moisture too long and removes the slight root density that functions as one of aloe's hormetic bloom signals. Aloe blooms most reliably in pots, where the root ball fills roughly 2/3 of the available space. Not cramped, not swimming. Terracotta pots are ideal for this reason. They're porous. They allow the soil to dry evenly, and they're heavy enough to prevent a tall aloe from tipping. When roots begin to crowd and show at the drainage holes, go up by 1 pot size, not 2. That graduated containment is part of what tells the plant that its environment is defined and stable. The fifth factor is temperature variation, and this is the one most American indoor growers overlook completely. In aloe's native habitat, the temperature swings between day and night can be 20 to 30 degrees. In a climate-controlled American home set to a year-round 70-degree, that variation disappears. And with it, disappears one of the primary hormetic signals the plant uses to register seasonal change. The solution is simpler than you'd expect. Place your aloe near an exterior window where it experiences the temperature differential from the glass. In fall and early winter, allow nighttime temperatures around the plant to drop into the low 50s, if possible. If you have a garage or enclosed porch that gets cool at night but doesn't freeze, moving your aloe there for the fall and winter with continued light access can be extraordinarily effective. This mimics the desert winter the plant evolved to respond to. Research from the University of Florida and from Texas A&M's AgriLife Extension consistently identifies cool nighttime temperatures as one of the strongest reliable bloom triggers for aloe cultivated in domestic settings. And the final factor, the one nobody wants to hear, is patience. Blooming an aloe is the product of years, not weeks. A plant that bloomed last spring was building toward that moment for 4 or 5 growing seasons before you saw any evidence of it. What this means practically is that there's no shortcut, no supplement, no technique that compresses the timeline by years. What you can do is create the right conditions and then resist the urge to constantly intervene. Check on it. Adjust when needed. And then let it work. The gardeners I've spoken with, people who have seen their aloe bloom 2 and 3 times, describe a particular shift that happens somewhere in year 3 or 4. They stop expecting it. They stop watching for it. They just care for the plant out of habit and affection. And then, one morning, without announcement, the stalk appears. The best things in life cannot be engineered on a timeline. They can only be cultivated toward. The bloom of an aloe vera lasts 2 to 4 weeks. That stalk that took years to build, it will be gone in a month. The flowers dry, the stalk browns. The plant returns to its quiet, spiky, indestructible self. But the fact that it happens at all, that this plant which survives neglect and drought and forgotten windowsills, decides one day to use all its stored energy to create something beautiful, that says something. Think about what actually produced that flower. It wasn't just time. Time alone doesn't do it. 22 years on that teacher's shelf in Savannah, and nothing. It was a specific quality of environment. A quality that doesn't emerge by accident. You created that environment. You placed it where light could reach it. You watered it and then stopped. You kept that space stable and intentional, maybe without even knowing that's what you were doing. Whether you knew it or not, you gave that plant exactly what it needed. And that's what every tradition we've talked about today, the Low Country healers, the Ethiopian village practice, the Hopi observation, the feng shui principle was pointing at. Not magic, not coincidence. The measurable result of a particular quality of attention sustained over time. There's something in that worth sitting with, because the conditions that allow an aloe to bloom, consistency, patience, the right kind of restraint, an environment that is tended but not smothered, those are the same conditions that allow most good things to grow. A plant that endures everything is also capable of extraordinary beauty. It just requires the right moment, created by the right hands. Has your aloe ever bloomed? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Take care of your plants. If this story changed how you look at the quiet plants on your windowsill, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Let's plant the seeds of the future. The next treasure will be revealed soon.